theme, campaign finance laws. Is East Africa ready to come monetize politics? Your host, Felix Kafuma, and again, it's a very good welcome to you all. Habari ya jioni. You are most welcome. We are live in Uganda, we are live in Kampala, we are live in Nairobi, we are live in Dar es Salaam, and soon have our live audiences. We are also live in other parts of Europe, and it could be an evening, so a very good evening to you all. And once again, welcome to our monthly series on money in politics. We will be discussing the theme, campaign finance laws in East Africa ready to have monetized politics. And with me, I have five panelists that have been selected from the entire East African community region. That is, we have someone coming from Kenya, and you know what's happening in Kenya. We have someone coming from Tanzania and someone coming from in our neighborhood here in Uganda, and we will be taking the detour of exactly how are we faring as a bloc, as countries in regulating the effect of money in politics, especially electoral politics. Before we start, allow me to set some house rules for the benefit of our viewers, but also and participants, but also encourage and welcome everybody to join us on our online platforms. We are live on Facebook and YouTube. You can be able to join in and be part of the conversation and send your comments, send your questions at that point in time when we open it up for discussions. With me, I have 5 panelists that I'll be introducing in a short while. But before I do so, let's do some bit of house cleaning. I'll be giving each panelist 4 minutes maximum to lay the context, and then we will be able to go into the Q&A, and after the Q&A, we will open up this discussion to the rest of our viewers who are following the discussion. It's a very good morning. It's exactly 4 minutes past 2 East African time, and we are live in Kampala. Our first panelist, who I will start recognizing according to those who have currently logged in. Our first panelist is Kenneth Masime. Kenneth Masime is a development professional and executive director at Center for Governance and Development, which is an NGO that strives for an equitable and democratic society in Kenya. In 2007 general elections, Kennedy was able to be part of the coalition that documented and exposed campaign finance malpractices by candidates and political parties. And he has equally been an active member of the Election Observation Group, ELOG. And we are very aware of what's happening in our neighborhood in Kenya. I think in about 7 months, Kennedy, you'll be able to update us on what's happening in Kenya. But for now, you are most welcome. Karibuni, it's good to have you on set. Ken, I think you are muted.
Okay, I'm now on. You can I begin?
You are on, sir. Just say hello to the audience and then we'll proceed.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Good to be here.
Great. Thank you, Kennedy. And we also we have Mpigani Apollinaire, who is joining us from Rwanda, and is currently the executive director for Transparency International, the Rwanda chapter. He is a professional he has worked for more than 20 years in this area of non-governmental institutions. He's a member of the TI Strategy 2030 Task Force. He is also a governance and government expert, and is he holds a master's degree from, I hope I pronounced this right, Newcastle University, Switzerland, and a diploma in international practices management of Applied University in Western Switzerland. You are most welcome, Ghani.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, great pleasure to be part of the panel.
It's great. Our next panelist, because I'm recognizing according to who is on set, if I can recognize those that are joining us shortly, is no other than Henry Muguzi, who is the campaign finance expert and the current executive director of Alliance for Campaign Finance Monitoring. He's a democracy expert with an anti-corruption activist. He's also a researcher and they're specialized in this area of money in politics. He's also part of he has observed international elections and has been part of the several election observer missions across the world. He holds a master's in public admin and management and a Bachelor of Arts in political science and public admin. Most welcome.
Thank you, Felix. An honor for me to be here, and I hope we shall have a very insightful next 2 hours. Thank you.
Okay, we expect to have Honorable Jova Kamateka to join us. He's part of the panel, and I can introduce her in her absence for the benefit of the audience. For those of you, she's from Uganda, and she's a former woman MP of Mitoma district. She served for 2 terms, 2015 to 2020 and 2020 to 2016 to 2020 when she lost. But she has been in parliament for 2 terms, and she's the first chairperson for Human Rights Committee for 7 years, who was a lady. So it's also important to observe that she holds an honorary doctorate on human rights and administration from the Commonwealth University. She'll be joining us very soon, and then we'll be able to recognize her. Our other panelist, who is also not yet on set, is Israel Ilunde, who is the founder and executive director of Youth Partnership countrywide. Yes, Honorable Jova has joined us. It's good to have you. The founder and executive director of the Youth Partnership countrywide, that is Israel Ilunde, will be joining us. But let me introduce him. He is the civil society activist working on empowerment of youth in Tanzania, and is the executive director and the founder. Is also has over 2 decades of engaging in development work, governance, and deepening local democracy in Tanzania. He's an electoral democracy expert, and equally he holds a postgraduate diploma in governance and leadership from Jomo Kenyatta University, and is also a graduate from development studies from Chimanzi Development Studies Center of Ireland. When he joins us, I'll be able to recognize him in a short while.
Israel has joined.
Israel has joined. Israel, it's good to have you. You are most welcome. Can you hear us?
Yes, I am around, and thank you very much. And I wish we would be together. Thank you.
It's good to have you on set.
Yeah.
Okay, now that we are fully constituted, I need to again remind the participants of the house rules that I'll be a bit strict on time, so you'll allow me to exercise that.
You have given me a chance to greet the viewers.
Oh, Honorable, you can say hello to the audience now that you're on set.
Thank you, Felix. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. We have to fight for our rights.
Good afternoon, Honorable. Pleasure to have you around.
Nice to be here indeed. Thank you.
Okay, so I was just giving a bit of housekeeping rules for this discussion to make meaning and benefit the audience, and just to let everybody who is watching us know that we will be having a session for your comments and your contribution to the discussion, but you can also type them and post them. I'll be able to pick them and have them shared with the audience and the rest of the panelists. But in the meantime, we are going to be giving each panelist 4 minutes maximum to provide the context of what's happening in their country concerning the issues to do with finance, campaign finance laws, and how are we regulating or legislating on this matter, especially looking at the context of the country. And I want to start with Honorable Jova Kamateka. I want to start with Kenya, but let me start with Honorable Jova Kamateka. Then I'll come to Kenya to paint for us the context of commercialized electoral politics in Uganda, and how it affects women participation from your perspective as a former politician?
Thank you, but I don't think you are being fair to me, because this is what my presentation is going to be about. But anyway, there is so much, people are just free to spend money anyhow, and there is so much corruption. So it has affected I would say, even the quality of the representatives that are elected into parliament. And really, it is no longer the people's choice. We are now having personal representatives, because it is those who are able to buy their way into these positions. It is not for each and every one. We have highly qualified and capable members of parliament and other politicians in their seats, but still they are all bothered by this unprecedented amounts of money that one needs to put in. So we lack integrity. We lack integrity, and it affects the masses. The people may have their choice of a leader that they want to elect into a certain position, but money is poured in almost at the last minute, and it derails what they had in their mind as their primary choice. So really, it is no longer now people using their rights to elect leaders of choice, but it is going according to the money available. For example, women leaders, I know I'll be talking about how this affects women leaders. You know, they are supposed to be elected by women electoral colleges, but you know, men find it easy to buy off these electoral colleges, take them in some resort, pay them handsome allowances, so as to have women of their choice be elected into these positions. So it is really disheartening, and it is disheartening. And for me, what I'm worried about, what it does to the pride of the people in their institutions, and eventually in their government and in their country, because they know that they are not electing leaders of choice, but they are electing leaders who are able to pay their way through.
I'll come back to you with specific questions that speak to your experiences. But let me now go to Kenya. We all know that all Action Live camera is focused on Kenya's upcoming elections, and it would be good to have Kennedy Masimi paint for us a picture of context of what's happening in Kenya in light of the discussion.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah, in Kenya, we have a problem with corruption historically. So we find a situation where in 2002, when we got an opposition government taking over from KANU back then, they engaged in a lot of anti-corruption reforms. So I can say in terms of campaign financing or political financing generally, there are over 8 legislations. But despite all that, you could say that corruption was almost inversely proportional to the number of legislation that was coming in. And corruption is a vice that is responsible for a number of governance disadvantages. One, it creates inequality in the democratic process. Women, people who don't have money, people living with disabilities are disadvantaged when it comes to now electoral campaigning. It undermines oversight institutions in the sense that people who get to man those institutions get there through corrupt mechanisms, and therefore those institutions are undermined in turn. Corruption also destabilizes the macroeconomics. Remember in 1992, when we first had our first multi-party elections, the aftermath then was serious inflation that really the economy is yet to recover from. We also find that corruption fuels insecurity and even crime. The monitoring we did in 2007 revealed that things like castle rustling, bank haste, etc. peak around the election period. So that is again this background that we came up with the Election Campaign Financing Act, especially in the context of a new constitution in 2010, that's now supposed to come up with mechanisms, the institutional framework and mechanism for monitoring campaign expenditure, the mobilization of resources themselves, etc. But you might know that we came up with this law in December 2013. It was supposed to commence on January 2014. By 2017 elections, its operationalization was suspended. And now we are approaching another election. And you remember that in 2017, that's when we had the elections. Now we are approaching another election in 2022. It's not going to be implemented. So you can imagine the kind of context that we are. And corruptible campaign financing will proceed unabated, and the legislation is there and it's not being implemented because of how it's being put in place by Parliament and politicians generally. I think I'll stop there for now.
Sure, you've done justice to it. And the last we checked, I think a group of civil society actors had gone to court over that. Shall come back to that. But next, we have, let me bring in here our colleague from Tanzania. We know you have a good law which that speaks to legislating on campaign financing. Israel alone, can you give us a context of Tanzania?
Thank you very much, Kenneth, and thank you very much, Henry, for the invitation. And I think I will use my 4 minutes effectively. Is it that I'm using the 4 minutes now?
Yes.
First of all, I want to say there is no election that can be done without money. Money is used in most of the electoral activities, and we will be cheating ourselves if we think campaigns and elections are done without use of money. But also, our concern is the reasonable amount of money that can be used or resources to be used during the election, morally and with discipline according to the law. In Tanzania, we enacted the 2010 Election Expenses Act, which was followed by the regulation in the same year, Election Expenses Regulations. And then in 2015, but also in the same year, the Election Expenses Maximum Amount Order, how much money can be spent. That was 2015. And we have seen characteristics of monetized politics, not only in Tanzania, but across many countries, but things like vote buying, especially in intra-party nominations, and somehow during general elections, with some cases, or those are not well reported due to political circumstances that you need to be well informed. You have the right to speak, but you are not sure after you have spoken if that right remains there and how will it be. So, but also the characteristic has been many of the youth, women, and people with disabilities afraid to go into electoral constituencies, fearing that the powerful people who have money may not be able to, they cannot defeat them. But also the enforcement of the law has been done. The forms have been prepared. People do fill forms and submit to the relevant authorities, declaring the amount of money they have, they want to, the amount of money expected to be spent, and so on. But then after the election, rarely you hear about the cases that have been filed by either by PCCB or by fellow candidates on if a person was involved in the monetary use during the elections. But the challenges has been NEC, the National Electoral Commission, which is the actually is the electoral management body, is not actually responsible with enforcing the election expenses law. The body that oversees the law is called the Registrar of Political Parties, which is actually rare across Africa and also in the world, but it is done and they normally do. But also the Registrar of Political Parties is an office established somehow, I think, independent, but it's at the risk of, because of its appointment nature, may not be able to follow and actually sanction the powerful politicians, because this is the body just also appointed by the president, and the president sometimes is also a candidate. So there is a question whether this organ can be very powerful and be able to sanction people who go against the law. And I think finally, as I said, there is a problem and challenge within intra-party nominations, because there is no uniformity, whether you do it as a normal nominations of nominees, or even when you do the women candidate, the special seats. So there is no uniformity. So that may raise a question about how things can be done. So maybe if later you raise some question, I may be able to go through and answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Israel. Really, you've done justice to giving us an understanding overview of the law in Tanzania. Let's cross over to our neighborhood here in Rwanda, and I hope my good friend is online. Mupiganyi, are you there? Can you help us understand how it is done in Rwanda? Do we have the similar law like we have seen in Kenya and Tanzania? Forget the challenges of enforcement, but how is it like in Rwanda? Mupiganyi?
Yeah, thank you, Felix, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I followed carefully the experience from other countries, but in Rwanda, probably due to our history, especially the recent 1994 genocide, the political system somehow different in a way that Rwanda, as a country, politician chose to work together in a way that though there is diversity in political parties, but those approved political parties are gathered in a coalition called Political Parties Forum, where they discuss matters, emerging issues politically. They first of all discuss them within or inside this forum of political parties. When it comes to elections, it's different to other countries. Here in Rwanda, it's rare or impossible to run as an independent, though the law provides for it. But political parties make a list of their candidates. So by doing so, you are running under your affiliation, political parties. So the difference is that the financial capacity of political parties are different. There are some who are really financially equipped, others who are struggling. But the law in Rwanda provides that all political parties accepted can benefit the grant from the government. In Rwanda, the funding of political parties is done domestically. You can't, it's not allowed to get funds from foreigners or outside donors. You have to mobilize funds among your members, or on the other hand, government provides you funds. So looking to the context, it's really probably very low. The risk of corruption as an individual when you want to to get a leadership position. But the challenge is probably at the transparency and accountability within the political parties, the appointment of those who will represent the parties. It's there where we some loopholes. In addition, in Rwanda, all political parties are declaring their assets on an annual basis. And this go under scrutiny by the Office of Ombudsman. And there is another requirement. If you get a donation or a donation, be it public figures from a political party, you have to declare it to the Office of Ombudsman if the amount go beyond $1,000 US. So you have to declare. So in nutshell, in Rwanda, the system somehow is limiting the space for individuals to be connected to the citizens to gain the votes. But inside, probably it's where someone could analyze and assess the accountability and how the system is built to avoid probably the nepotism and the favoritism among the political parties members who could be appointed to represent the party in the election. Let me stop here, Felix.
Oh, thank you so much, Uganda. Very interesting. A lot of things I've learned about my neighbor here in Rwanda, on how the politics is arranged, especially electoral politics. Let me first make this announcement that we are encouraging everybody to go and click on that link and register if you really want to be part of this discussion, but also to keep track of those that have been part of this engagement. Help us, please click on the link and register your presence. That would be very, very appreciated of you. And also, don't forget to join in via our Facebook Facebook account, and also we are live on all our social media accounts. For example, you can be part of this discussion on YouTube. We are live on YouTube, and you can also place your comment or question, and we'll be able to handle it at some point. Now that we have a fair understanding across board from other countries, let me come to Henry concerning Uganda, because like I think Rwanda, also Uganda doesn't have a law on campaign financing, but what is the context like, and what does that imply on our democracy? Henry?
Thank you very much, Felix, and of course, colleagues from other countries. A pleasure to be here. Now, when you cut around the electoral legal framework for Uganda, you'll discover that we have provisions that speak to public financing of political parties. We have provisions that speak to misuse of public resources during campaigns. We have provisions on voter bribery during election campaigns. But what we do not have is a law that speaks about campaign finance. So in that regard, Uganda is completely devoid of a law on campaign finance. On campaign finance. Now, when we read the Article 21 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but also Article 25 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, these two provisions enjoin state parties, and Uganda is one of them, to ensure that they hold elections that reflect the free expression of the will of the electors or of the people. But in the case of Uganda, elections have ceased to be an expression of the will of the people and have now turned into an expression of the power of money. Now, elections here suffer from a monster of commercialized politics, where political parties and candidates with more money often win. In the recent elections we held in January 2021, about 85% and more of the candidates that took the day are the same candidates that were spending more than their competitors. So because the ballot paper has been commoditized, the prospect of having free consent of the citizens in an election has dimmed or has been subdued. So Ugandan voters, and I guess the same could be in Kenya, do not think about elections deeply or rationally, and elections are about leaving a share, leave with me a share of what you're going to earn. So when you go to political office, you can recoup your money. Now, the downside is that when money starts to manufacture voter consent, it creates what I can call cosmetic democracy. It weakens the state, and the weakened state ultimately crumbles, often into captivity. No wonder these days Kenya and Uganda are talking about issues. The narrative is state capture. And of course, at the bottom of this captivity is the monster of grandiose corruption. So the downside again is that the state can become delegitimized. And one day we may experience a situation here where in one of our countries, there could be a failed state. All right. Now, although voter bribery is prohibited here, like I said, the practice forms, the practice takes many forms of voter inducement, and what we know as clientelism as a form of corruption, which we are often used to buy voter support. Now, it does seem as though that the spirit of partisanship has not sunk well into the minds of Ugandan voters, which is why if someone woke up in the morning supporting a particular party, he or she can easily be swayed to vote for another party or another candidate on the basis of money. So that is where we are. And a situation where money is being used to control voter consent, a situation where money is being used to undermine the principle of people expressing, of an election expressing the free will of the people, is a situation that is worrying. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Henry, for painting a picture in Uganda. Of course, we will come back to some of the things you've raised about the controlled voter consent. If you are just joining us, we are live from Kampala, and we are having our third webinar series under the theme Campaign Finance Laws, and we are asking ourselves the question: is East Africa ready to curb monetized politics? And with me, I have a representative from Kenya, Kennedy Masime, who has joined us live from Kenya. We have also a colleague from Tanzania, Israel Irundi, who has joined us. And also we have our colleague from Rwanda, Gani Aponia, who has joined us. And from Uganda, we have two colleagues. One is Henry, who has just been sharing the context of Uganda. And also we have with us Honorable Joe Makamateka, who is sharing with us our experience. Like I said, you can be part of this conversation and follow us on our social media platforms, and put your questions there. We'll be able to attend to them. Now, let's switch it a little bit up and look at the Q&A. And I will not be having any form of formal format or following order, but let me, at this point, bring in Honorable Joe Makamateka. From your experience, because on the panel, you are the only politician who has lived what we are discussing. Probably I may be corrected at some point, but as according to the bios that I got, you are the only politician we have here. From your experience and from your view, do you think a law legislating campaign finance can cure the challenges that especially women face in an environment that is full of men, dominated by men who have access to resources, but also very commercialized in nature? Is the law the cure to this problem? Honorable.
Thank you very much, Felix. I think a law is not the cure. And I think that's why Uganda has not been so keen on having a law in place. And even to be direct to answer the question whether East Africa is ready to regulate campaign financing, my answer would be no. Simply because the chief beneficiaries of this malpractice are the would-be enforcers. Those, if you put the law in place, those who are supposed to enforce it are the main beneficiaries of not having campaign financing. And so That's why it will not work. We equally have good laws on the statute books, but they are openly abused by the enforcement agencies and openly, and nothing is done by those in authority. And so I don't see any use that a law would do. Governments must undertake to isolate perpetrators and have them face heavy penalties so as to build integrity and restore hope amongst our people. Otherwise, as someone has said, there's no democracy to talk about now, for as long as people buy themselves into positions of leadership. And right now what we have, when you buy your way into politics or into positions of leadership, we end up having personal representatives rather than people's representatives. And I think it is Henry who has said, you see, when people get there after spending so much in the campaigns, they now want to, first of all, it creates a sense of entitlement. So they now go and they want to replace what they lost in the campaigns. It is not surprising, therefore, that in a country like Uganda, where you have more than 500 members of parliament, you will see only 30 or 50 at a sitting, because they are trying to recover money that they lost. As for women, you all know that women face so many impediments. Sorry. You know that women face so many problems, most especially the culturally assigned roles, responsibilities, and expectations. You are a woman, you are somebody's wife, you are somebody's daughter. You are not supposed to raise your voice. You are not supposed to be out there holding meetings and looking for votes. You can't even ask for money to help finance your campaigns. And you are not supposed to be out there in away from your home in parliament. So the women have to earn the respect and support of their husbands and their families before they can engage in leadership roles. They are constantly intimidated even when they are highly educated and when they attain positions of leadership. Most women are struggling to raise their children, to feed them and see them through school, and to offer all sorts of help to members of extended families. So they don't have money to splash around to buy votes. And so when these positions are based on money, then the women are disadvantaged, they are disempowered, and they are left out. A woman's every coin counts. And we know that in campaigns, you're supposed to spend money. But what we are concerned about here is how much money do you put in so as to get into this position. Unregulated campaign financing makes it almost impossible for women to compete directly with men for the constituency seats. And that's why the UN, considering some of these challenges, created positive discrimination and the reserved seats for special interest groups, which include women at all levels. But as I mentioned earlier, this one has not even been spared the negative impacts of lack of regulating campaign financing. So you find men buying off entire electoral colleges so that they can they fight women who are strong. And so women in Uganda chose that they will have it on the basis of adult suffrage. And of course, this is so expensive. Secondly, if you will allow me, because of this tokenism of creating special seats for the women, now women handle bigger areas. You have women representing districts, which districts are represented by several male MPs. For example, the district I was representing has 3 men constituency MPs. And these ones will easily gang against the woman, especially if they think the woman is strong. We have already said that unregulated campaign financing creates that sense of entitlement. And let me tell you, my brothers and sisters, women are natural carers. They want to reach down and touch hearts. They want to be seen to be creating impact in their communities. They want to have programs that will uplift the women and their households, to pay school fees here and there, help people pay school fees here and there, to mourn with those who mourn, to dance and celebrate with those who are celebrating. And when the women representatives are not able to do this, they are disillusioned, and you do not want disillusioned leaders. I want also to say, if you can give me a minute, I want also to say that women are naturally wired with a higher sense of integrity. So paying out money to buy votes threatens their worth of existence to the core. It bothers us so much. And as you all know, unregulated campaign financing has also created, has made the electorate putting unrealistic demands on political leaders, including the women, of course. Now you find political leaders doing roads in their communities, they are building bridges, they are building hospitals, schools. These are services that are supposed to be rendered by the government. Our country is littered by ambulances written on, with posters of members of parliament because they were donated by members of parliament. When you do this, you are supposed to pay for the driver, pay for the fuel, and maintain the vehicle and service it all through. It is an unnecessary drain. And without saying so much, allow me also to say that this. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to you. I'll come back to the follow-up question, but let's first thank you for that, because you've painted a picture of what it means to a woman to contest in such an environment that is too commercialized. But let me come to Kenya and Kenneth, just help us understand here, because at some point we've had Professor Pierre Olumumba on many occasions reveal on how he participated in elections as a candidate, and he conducted more campaign events than his competitors. And he lost. And the argument was that he didn't have money, and he lost to people who had much more money. Does this paint the picture of Kenya? How commercialized is the ballot of Kenya?
Not really. Money is important in electioneering in Kenya, but it's not everything. I'm saying this because I've seen complete paupers being elected and tycoons being rejected by the voters. In the last election, I think there was a 24-year university student who was elected. He didn't even have money, no car. I think the president bought him a car after he got to parliament. So it's a bit complex than that. There are a number of factors at play. Money is just one of them. You need to identify, first of all, Kenya is very heterogeneous. You need to know where which constituency and the context that obtains there. There are places where just by identifying with your constituents, attending funerals, mourning with them, being part of the community can get you elected. There are areas where they grow, for instance, coffee, sugar, fighting for their rights vis-a-vis these crops can get you votes. There are regions where they have presidential candidates. Aligning properly, you can ride a wave. You get the point. So money is part of it, but it's not everything. It's a bit more complex than that.
Okay, but how significant is the contribution of money to the equation? Can you give all those others minus money?
Sorry?
Because can all those other factors other than money primarily catapult you into being voted in Kenya? Or can you apportion the significance of the influence of money in the Kenyan politics in terms of outcomes?
Of course, it is very important. I was just disabusing the notion that money is everything. You need money to engage in elections, because treating voters, vote buying, what do you call it? Handing shootouts. It's a Kenyan culture. Also, the parties are very weak. So the burden is on the individuals. I know members of the party sometimes upon you to buy the card and distribute it. And I've seen where even candidates organize party nominations. You get the ballot boxes, and those who have money can even ferry voters, especially in the primaries. So money is very important, but it's not everything. People still get elected because they ride on ethnic waves, they ride on their participation within community and identifying with the voters where it matters.
Okay, thank you so much. Of course, we're going to come back and discuss the Campaign Finance Act, which, and even for the second time, the MPs are conniving throughout and not applied on the elections to themselves. But if I come to that, let me bring in here Israel from Tanzania. The Election Expenses Act of 2010 provides for disclosure of campaign funds. I looked at it. And specifically part 3, section 7, clause 3, this is the information the candidate should disclose, which includes, among others, amount of money, source of money, and any other intended resource to be used during elections. Share with us the experience of Tanzania, especially when it comes to enforcing this provision of disclosure during campaigns. Israel? Israel? Oh, he's there.
Before I answer your question, let me appreciate Honorable Jova for the experience, and Kenneth for the experience also trying in politics. But two things that I want to look at them is that there is always an importance of money, but also there is a comparison between financial capital and social capital. And Kenneth was trying to, which can be taught. People have to invest in people in terms of relationship building, not investing in buying votes. But all the other thing is, Honorable Jova, you talked about things that the women can be ready to do, helping, paying school fees and so on. In Tanzania, one of the young person was approached and told, if you want to become a member of parliament, start going to that constituency, start buying, paying school fees, buying hospital equipment, and things of that kind. And then this guy was very worried that if that is the case, then I need enough capital so that I spend money before election, and then maybe I will go on, that will be my life, and I become the ATM, because people will be getting out of me money, not good ideas on how to do development. And if you remember the community, the constituency development funds, which were established, in my understanding, at one time I even was against it because it was established so that each member of the parliament will be able to spend money to support development, which is in conflict with the available and current structure of development, where you have the local government authorities, you have the councils, which have to do to people. But then you get two things here. You have the member of parliament doing some developments, and you have the council doing some developments. And is that not sort of a political corruption? So we are instilling a culture of people buying votes before even they are even nominated. And even when they become in power, you even empower them more to do a lot of community support works, but they in the name of the constituents or the name of the member of parliament. So to answer the question on enforcing the law, Tanzania, I think they have made a progress. When they did the law in 2010, they made two regulations, as I said earlier. the election expenses regulation. They even made what is called the election expenses maximum funds order that sets the amount of money each individual, each candidate should spend how much, the party should spend how much during nomination, during the campaigns, and what can be spent during the polling, the expenses related to the polling day, especially by the government or the election management body. They had prepared the form, for example, form number EE1. This is the form that must be filled by whoever wants to become a member of parliament to contest or the president. So they did. And when I asked the office of the registrar of political parties, if they do follow up and they monitor these kind of things, they have their own way of monitoring, and they also make a report. And what they said, it is not necessary that we publish in newspapers, but we have reports where people have done, they have implemented the law. So that's what I could say as my experience. But I think we still need to do more in terms of CSOs be vibrant, to access those reports, get them open. And our interest here is to make sure that the registrar political parties release these reports publicly immediately after these people have submitted their reports, instead of keeping them in their offices. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing with us that unique experience in Tanzania. Let me cross over to Rwanda and bring my brother Uganda. You when you were sharing, you seem to tell us that when it comes to political parties, because Uganda has a problem of independence, and I think Emily will talk to that, what that means. But when it comes to Rwanda, political parties seem to be much stronger to have people want to participate through political parties. And I'm going to come to the question which I want to ask you. When it comes to Rwanda, so what is the significant contribution of money in terms of influencing electoral outcomes in Rwanda? Let me put it that way. Even when you stand within political parties.
Money, I think money, as the others mentioned, is one of the powerful tool to gain the elections. As I said, we have, of course, we have many parties, various parties, which have different size and the financial capacities. Let's give you an example on the ruling party, RPF. It is one of the wealthy party when it comes to the campaign. You can't compare it with, let's say, Green Party, which is a new approved one. So if a party is economically wealthy, it can conduct easily its campaign, reach out a big number of citizens, and of course attract interest on his behalf. So the little contribution of the government, what the government is sharing to all the registered political parties is really very little compared to the intended expenses when you conduct a campaign, an election campaign. So,
just a question there: is the money shared equally within political parties, or is the formula applied?
Yes, it's shared equally as long as you are registered, and of course there is an equal portion that the parties are getting. The difference is on their own capacity. As we said, the parties are funded through the contribution of their members, the donations or bequests or activities. Some of the parties have income generating activities. Others are still struggling to survive or living with even this little government contribution. So looking to the size of the parties, you can anticipate the outcome of the elections, depend to what the party has invested in campaigning. So in Rwanda, we see really that the ruling party is the stronger and very national wide present, while others are limiting their presence in the city of Kigali, and even the rural citizens are not do not know them. So this difference, discrepancies in the financial capacity results at the end the difference or results in terms of election or presence in let's say in the parliament or even presidential elections. So this is probably the difference in Rwanda context, looking to the fact that the candidates are ruling on the name of their parties. So depending which party you are affiliated, the chance to be elected in the specific seats are different. They depend to your party.
How many parties are in Rwanda?
We have 11.
11.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'll come back to you at some point. Henry, let me bring you. Yeah, thank you so much, Uganda. Let me bring in here, Henry, concerning Uganda, because Kenya has a law, though they have suspended its use, and we'll come back to that. Tanzania has a law, there's some, according to what Israel is telling us, that there's some effort of enforcing it. Rwanda does not have a specific law, but also Uganda, we don't have a specific law that speaks to campaign financing. So, but why doesn't Uganda, what's stopping Uganda from having such a law?
Thank you, Felix. And of course, when it comes to Uganda, the story is not different from the story of Kenya. It would seem as if the legislators do not want to change the status quo. And because all the efforts that have been in place to ensure that there's some semblance of the campaign finance law seem to have not captured the interest of legislators, and because one of the things they fear is if you have a law in place that requires you to declare the sources of your money, many of the legislators do not want their sources to be exposed. If you have a law that requires you, that puts a ceiling on how much money you can spend in an election, many of the legislators here want to spend and spend until they can spend no more. They don't want to be fettered by any piece of legislation. And so the interest has not been there. You would recall that in 2017, the Attorney General tabled the 5 electoral amendment laws in Parliament. And at least 3 of these had campaign finance provisions. But at the end of the day, the efforts were put in notwithstanding. The 10th Parliament voted overwhelmingly to defer these amendments to the next Parliament, the 11th one. Now, when the 11th Parliament came, as part of their rules of procedure, the Speaker decided that all the business of the 10th Parliament shall not be carried forward into the 11th Parliament, and therefore there it fell. But the thing is, the bigger question is, who stands to benefit or to profit from a situation where there are no campaign finance laws? And you get to see that a legislation cannot pass or be enacted if it is not in the interests or on the heart of the party in power, the dominant party. And one of the things that legislating on campaign finance is not one of the things that are on the mind of this dominant party, the NRM. And therefore, the support, first of all, the political will to legislate and regulate money is not there. Never mind that there have been some, what is it called, posturing and rhetoric from the president himself saying, oh, we must do something to control money in elections. But when it comes to the actions, you don't get to see that coming through. So it's the lack of interest and support. One from the topmost office, I think the head of state does not want it. The party in power, which has a commanding majority, a party that enjoys the tyranny of numbers, does not like it. But also the opposition side doesn't seem to like it. Everybody seems to be fearing the unknown, because it is not clear how the electoral playing field would change as a result of enacting a campaign finance law. That's what I think.
Thank you, Henry. We are still discussing campaign finance laws. Is East Africa ready to monetize politics? And with me, I have 5 panelists from Uganda. We have Kamateka, the only lady who is giving us the perspectives from a practical experience as a politician. But with me also, I have Israel Ilinde from Tanzania, and also I'm joined Kennedy Masime from Kenya. Then I also have Mupigani Apollinaire from Rwanda and Henry Muguzi from Uganda, and we are making sense of whether time has come for East Africa to legislate on campaign financing. Picking up from Henry, let me cross to Kennedy. Kennedy, help us understand why Kenyans on the second, again for the second time, they choose not to enforce or apply the loan campaign financing. Yet we are heading into elections. It's the second time it's happening. Why is it that Kenyans choose not to try out that law?
Thank you. Let me begin by emphasizing that, as I mentioned earlier, the Election Campaign Financing Act 2013 is just one of campaign or political financing laws in Kenya. So there are already some other laws in place that can be implemented, but even those are not being implemented, or they are implemented haphazardly. But going back to the Election Campaign Financing Act, there are 2 sets of reasons why I think it's a challenge implementing it. One is that disclosure. Politicians get monies from all over. Some could be even proceeds of crime, proceeds of corruption. So you don't want your donors to be known. And I think even the donors themselves would not like to be known, because they can be followed and asked where they got the money in the first place. Even in terms of the individuals campaigning, sometimes they engage in corruption, sometimes they engage in informal businesses where they have money that are not known by the Kenya Revenue Authority. For instance, the Kenya Revenue Authority could easily follow you and ask you where your sources of money are if they are not commensurate with the official businesses or the job that you have. So there are those risks. But there are also practical considerations. If you look at the law, it has quite a number of cumbersome requirements. Candidates, other than disclosing and opening themselves to public scrutiny, are required to set up structures that require money and expertise that they may not have. So parties are expected to set up campaign expenditure committees. Candidates, including independent candidates, are expected to set up campaign expenditure committees with professionals. This means an extra cost. In the early version of this law, there was funding attached to it. For instance, candidates that go through a certain threshold were supposed to be compensated, as is done in other jurisdictions, for instance, South Korea and others. But now, this is like adding an extra burden to the parties, candidates, including independent and party candidates, without giving them something in turn. So this creates the reluctance to implement the law. And that's why we've jumped it technically in 2013. That was the first time, because you remember the elections happened in March, then it was implemented and deferred so that it could not affect those particular elections. And then 2017, we deferred it again. And then on a technicality again now in 2022, we have also deferred it. I don't know until when, but we are reluctant to implement it.
Okay. There you have it, because before I let you go, I read somewhere that there was a group of society actors who had preferred to take this to court. What do we make of that? Do we hope into that process?
They have gone to court. Yes, I know the case was mentioned. I don't know the verdict or whether it has been expensed with so far. But what I can say is that the outcome is very clear. Kenyans are not ready, but the politicians are not ready to implement this law, including the agencies that are supposed to enforce it, including the IBC, because it's an extra burden. And we don't have the infrastructure in place to implement it, and we are not also committed to implementing it. So even if the court were to grant them their wish, I don't think it will be implemented for 2022.
Okay. Kenya is a very interesting case indeed. Jova, there are issues around disclosure. Now this is where I want you to, from a practitioner's perspective, as a woman candidate, what are your sources? Ideally, I don't think they're the same. What are your sources of campaign financing? And how easy is it for a woman politician to access campaign financing?
Thank you very much. For me, I want to thank my colleagues and their contributions. But the reason Uganda has not passed a law, the reason why those who have the law have not implemented is because of corruption. If the provisions of the law were to be implemented equally across board, if we say, for example, you are not going to spend more than 200 million Uganda shillings, and it is 200 million for every individual who enters the campaign, people would not fear, would not be bothered about where they are getting the money. People would not be bothered about the implementation. What matters is it fair? But if you are going to say in the law that it is 200 million, someone spends 205 and you put them in jail, and someone spends 500 million and nothing is done, that's where the problem is. So, and if it is 200 million and we are all giving the sources of this money, if, for example, I've been a member of parliament for one term, how would I fail to account for 200 million, for example? But people fear this because they know it is going to be used against them. Plus, people can concoct all sorts of reasons. Someone can say she has spent 500 million, she got it from here and there, when it was not true. So it is the issue of corruption and issue of integrity. If we passed the laws and we were committed to implementing them as they are, then there would be no problem. So the law has not been put in place because people fear being victimized. And I think a colleague has mentioned that. Kamateka's source of financing or women sources of financing. For example, me, before I joined politics, I was a civil servant. I was working. I had a bit of savings, and also I had networks. I had friends. Someone can give you some 2 million shillings, 3 million. And actually, a colleague, I think from Kenya, said someone, a student was elected into politics. Usually for the first term, people are elected almost on merit. They don't spend a lot. But second term, people will want you to go naked. They want to strip you of everything. So this is not uncommon that for the first term, people will let you go in, but following that, then you have to even go into debt so as to make it. So I think disclosing sources of money, for example, women, they can be sponsored by their husband, they can be sponsored by family members. I know we fear that financing may come from donors and all that, but if it is regulated campaign financing and the money to be put in is reasonable, you don't even need money from donors. People now are tempted to get money from donors because they know that they can spend any amount, they can spend anyhow, and so as to buy their way through. And women, of course, women women have several ways of income, although they spend too much, but they trade, they get involved in trade, but women really have expenditure is too much on the women. That's why we would cry that there should be campaign financing that is implemented fairly, implemented and enforced.
Sure. You stood on participating in the NRM primaries. I think in 2015, 16, and also in 2021.
Yes.
The ones for 2021, for some of us to observe in some parts of Uganda, we saw, I think that's when NRM did try out the system of lining up behind the preferred candidate, if I'm not mistaken. But we saw scenes of people who are lined up in primaries behind their candidate being bribed openly. And so I want to find out from you your experience participating in the party primaries in NRM, because some have argued that they are very expensive.
You have noted correctly. I mean, this was a campaign all over the country. So whatever happened almost everywhere. People are bribed in the night. People are bribed during the actual exercise of lining up. Yes, we agreed to line up, but this lining up should not continue. I think we abuse the rights of Ugandans by exposing them to this lining up. A person's choice is supposed to be secret. It is secret ballot. But we know, because someone gave you money in the night, if they see you standing behind somebody else, then you are in trouble. So I think that's why now we want to keep this lining up, but it is an abuse, and I hope that Ugandans will fight against it. So what can we say? Even the ballot papers that go in a box, they will be changed. Even the results, as the counting, they will be changed. So the issue of corruption. That's why I'm saying that unless governments go in and punish perpetrators, and unless we, all of us, have this desire to create corrupt-free societies, otherwise, putting laws in place is useless. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, that's you. In your opinion, you think the laws are not enough. Henry, let's talk about the political parties. Rwanda has does finance political parties participate in the election and on equal basis. Uganda has applied different methods, and recently we've been seeing some exchanges in media between political parties having shared public funding, which was released, I think, about last week or the other week. But as an expert in this area, how do political parties in Uganda finance their elections in real time? Because there's what we know and there's what we don't know. But how do they raise their resources and finance the political parties and their activities in real time?
Thank you very much, Felix. Of course, when it comes to financing political parties anywhere in the world, there are standard avenues through which political parties can do so. The first one is through member contributions. So the idea is that you're a political party, the people that subscribe to be members of your party make contributions. This could be annual subscription and so on. So that's one avenue. The second avenue is that political parties can engage in some form of business. You can have a political party that either has a building that generates money or a business that generates money. This can be a source of income. Number three, political parties can sell and market party paraphernalia. You know, the badges, the capes, the bandanas, and they can raise money from this. Number four, political parties can go out and seek for grants and donations from whoever. This could be donors locally and internationally, but this area has to be well regulated. And number 5, political parties can also get money from the state, from the national budget. So in the case of Uganda, political parties have been kind of their wings to fundraise have been clipped by the Political Parties and Organizations Act that puts a ceiling at how much money you can raise from a single source. But I think also there's a ceiling that makes it difficult for you to get money from external sources. So they have tended now to depend more on the money that comes from the national budget, which is public financing of political parties. The challenge here is that public financing to political parties in Uganda only goes to those parties that have representation in parliament. So the rest of the political parties are grassing. You have on the list 26 political parties registered, but only less than 7 are active and can be able to field the candidates, even at village level. And you see, but beyond that, I think these political parties also act in a way and manner that they have also leadership problems because they are not well managed. And if you're not well managed as an institution, then how are you going to be able to make sure that you're able to fundraise and look for money and survive? So because they're not well managed, they're not able to explore most of the avenues they're supposed to explore to raise money. For example, starting with the party in power to the opposition, many of them will give out party membership cards for free. But who does that? This is supposed to be an avenue for raising money. So you get to see that the party paraphernalia, you know, I've seen it during campaigns that people are actually bribed to put on a yellow t-shirt. But this t-shirt should be for sale. So I think there's been some kind of distortion of order in the order of how political parties must be financed that we need to get back on the drawing board on. But overall, political parties are very poorly funded. It's only those parties that are, have representation in parliament that get funding, but also the formula that is applied in sharing the money from public coffers is one that favors the ruling party because the formula is that of numerical strength in parliament. And of course, with the tyranny of numbers of the party in power, the money is, the party in power takes the lion's share, and the party in power is the NRM party. And therefore, still the parties in opposition get just, leftover crumbs, already crumbs, and this is not helping. So the situation of political parties the financing situation of political parties in Uganda is really in a sorry state. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Henry. In the next 15 minutes, we'll be opening it up for your comments, contributions. I'll be reading some of the questions coming from different panelists and also allowing, taking some hands. So in about 15 minutes, I'll be opening it up for your participation. But before we do that, let me come to Israel. There's something interesting here in Tanzania, which I read in your act, that speaks to, I think it's the Election Expenses Act, which provides for, which speaks to, it has directs the minister to prescribe maximum amount of election expenses depending on the size, puts caps, ceilings, depending on the size of the constituency, categories of the candidate, population of the people, and the communication infrastructure, among others. In the regulations, this section on the ceiling then becomes absent. What explains this? Because is it an oversight? Is it deliberate to have this kind of discrepancy between the regulations and the law itself?
Thank you very much, Felix. It was deliberate. As I said earlier, they made the regulation. They didn't put those details, but they immediately made another regulation called the Election Expenses Maximum Fund Order. And that is, it is detailed. If you go to the website, it is called Registrar of Political Parties in Tanzania. You will see that the order, it is there. It's called Election Expenses Maximum Fund Order. And I tell you, it is there. The president, the member of parliament, the councillor, special seats, and you will be surprised. While one of the candidates is allowed to spend even 8 million shillings, a special seat candidate is only allowed to spend 11 million. If you are in rural as a ward councillor, as compared to the ward councillor contesting in an urban center, there is also a ceiling that has been set. And when I was looking at it, I found the urban contestant in the ward level is 8 million, 8.0, and in rural is 6 million. But if you go to special seats councillors at that very low area, local area, only 4 million. If you are in urban area, and rural only 3.5, and then you could imagine. Then parties are given an opportunity to spend more, and the president is given an opportunity to spend more. So the ceiling has been there, and you must fill the form before starting your campaigns. Tell the state where did this money come from, and you are being restricted to receive money even from Uganda or Kenya. You are not allowed to get money for campaign purposes from outside the country. It must be, but also reading from the Political Parties Act, which is also supervised by the registered political parties, the parties must finance themselves. Like what Henry has said, only those who have representatives in decision-making bodies, the member of parliament. If you have more in parliament, you have more money. As of now, I think the Chama cha Mapinduzi are getting the best out of that fund allowed to get into political parties' subsidies or subvention, because the opposition parties are very few in the House. And also, but parties are allowed to fundraise online, do fundraising events. I've seen some of them doing a lot, and they're getting some money online. That's what I could be able to say at the moment. I think I will have some concluding remarks after the floor. Thank you.
Okay. If you can allow me, Felix, to ask Israel, does the president of Tanzania, when he's a candidate, does he also have to declare the sources of his campaign funds?
Yes, all candidates, including the president, must declare.
So the late Magufuli, where did he get his money?
What?
The late Magufuli, where did he get his money from? The money for campaigns?
The law says all information registered at the respective places, because the president files the information at the national level, and the member of parliament at the constituency or district level, and the councillor at the ward level. And this information remains secret unless they are used during the court, if anything is for investigation or somebody is defending something. So we even don't know where the late Honorable Magufuli got the money. But if you want to contest and look for the information, you must file a case and get the information.
Okay, I think the issues to do with a public disclosure of that information, because it's kept secret. Let me quickly, as I run down my time, I have about 5 minutes to open it up for the participants online to raise their questions and participate. Let me quickly go to Kenya. Kennedy, we saw some, I think it was in the news, Raila Odinga, one of the candidates, promising a stipend of Kenya shillings 6,000, which is $52 a month per poor household if elected president. We've also seen that happen back in Uganda, where our head of state dishes out money during campaigns here and there. So help us understand what is explaining this this behavior? And where will he get the money anyway? Can you unmute?
Sorry, you cannot look at it in two ways. Firstly, this is just part of social security. Already in Kenya, we have some money for elderly people. Because of the poverty level, sometimes there are families that are suffering. They need basic necessities. So I think after 70, you can get some stipend from the government. Sometimes people with disability get this kind of funding. So it's a trend, which I think happens even in the developed countries, in like Europe, this like the welfare state. So you can look at it positively, but on the negative, you can also look at it in terms of the fact that in Kenya, for instance, we don't have ideology. Parties are ad hoc. I mean, you are aware that since 2002, even the sitting president has to change parties. If he goes to the next term, he goes with the so parties are not stable. So policy debates are not there. So it's voter bribery, and voter bribery can be the crude one of giving handouts, but it can also be structured. Of you give something because you have no policy, you should be seen to be offering something to the voters, and in that context, you can explain the 6,000. The other candidate, the vice president, for instance, is saying you set aside 100 billion for the youth, for business, and that's what everybody does. Actually, in Kenya, especially in 2013 elections, or let's say in the 2017 elections, you cannot differentiate, for instance, between a governor and a senator when they are campaigning. All of them is, I will do this to you, I will do this to you. Yet a governor is in charge of a particular region, but the senator is supposed to be up there doing policy and legislation, but they don't distinguish because people want direct injection. You get the point. And it's that spirit that you will see a lot of that coming in. I'll do this to you, I'll do this for you.
Okay, it's not so different from Uganda, where you have politicians promising so much. I'm now going to the comment sections. If you have a comment, you can raise your hand. I'll be able to see you up. I already asked, and this goes to I think to Honorable Joba Kamateka, that if campaigns are expensive for women, why don't they stand for direct seats, where you don't have to cover a bigger area while campaigning? Honorable, there's a question for you on that one. Why don't women prefer standing on direct seats?
Well, thank you very much. I think that person does not understand. Going for the direct seat, okay, I know it is a smaller constituency, but it is more expensive because now the men that you are competing with are pouring in so much money. And so that's why it becomes very difficult for the women to compete with these men who are pouring in so much money. Can you maybe also allow me to say, Henry said earlier that politicians want to spend so much. No politician wants to spend money anyhow, especially during the campaigns. Some have sold off their properties. Some have committed suicide after because they have ended up in debt. So no politician would want to spend money anyhow. I thought I would say that.
Yeah, but I think the bigger question is that if they all feel there's a problem with very expensive campaigns, why is nobody willing to step up and bail the cat? But they continue to be traumatized by the cat. I think that's why the challenge is that they don't seem to show that they don't want to spend in the way they come up to support a law or to really push for a law legislating campaign finance. But I'm going to come back to that.
They don't have power over the cat. They don't have power.
Okay. As I read more comments coming up, let me come to Henry, and here is something that I want you to help us understand and appreciate. This whole practice of individual merit and independence, which is that is so predominant in Uganda. First of all, why are we in that situation where we don't have strong political parties for people to stand under political parties, like it is in Rwanda, for example, where they mainly stand under political parties, and we are still stuck in individual merit, yet we are under multiple dispensation.
Thank you very much, Felix. You will not see that from 1986, when the National Resistance Army took over power and introduced a government managed by the National Resistance Movement, it came with something they called individual merit. Ugandans seem to have loved that individual merit, but I think also the party loved it because I think it entrenched the dominance of the movement system of government. Now, in 2005, when we returned to multi-party political dispensation, I think the return was only on paper. So you recall that under the movement system, it was individual merit. So because the multi-party dispensation returned to was only on paper, because until now, we are still experiencing what you can call a dominant political party system. We don't have multi-party as yet. The principle of individual merit has continued to be prevalent. Now, under individual merit, the people get to vote for a particular person's qualities, but the advantage on the side of the voter is that then they are able to get something back from the individual. And because they're able to get something back, then they would love it. Now, the individuals who contest on individual merit, I think some of the, as independents, it's because of the weaknesses within the political parties. The political parties of Uganda suffer from a deficit of internal democracy. And therefore, like you had Jovia share about the party primaries of NRM, for example, they were flawed with lots of irregularities, but also at least NRM had the party primaries. The other opposition parties had something different. Some of them had the appointments, others selections. So there is no fairness in the process of choosing who gets to hold the flag of the political party. And so in Uganda, because of that, then you get to see that there are quite a number of individuals that offer themselves as individuals, in which case then the issue of individual merit and independent candidates continues to thrive. So what we are experiencing is a weakened party system, because once individuals get to understand that if you don't feel you've received justice within your party, you have the option of contesting, then many of the party members would not be keen on being whipped by the or being whipped or sanctioned by the political party systems themselves. So you have a growing number of those individuals, and this, sincerely speaking, is doing nothing but weakening the democratization process, because the democratization process cannot progress when you have weak political parties in place, and weak political parties cannot be strong when people have enjoy a free reign. They can move out at will and stand and be elected. Thank you.
I'm reading some of the comments coming through the chat. I'm seeing here Najiba Pakistan saying that implementation of laws is an issue of political will. Who stands to gain or to lose? For finance laws, I think lack of political will is a key aspect in the reluctance in its implementation. I think that's a comment coming in from Najiba Kakesi. And I'll be reading more comments, please, including your questions. We've opened up the lines for you to get to us and ask the questions. Let me bring in here Iganyi concerning Rwanda here. What kind of sanctions exist in case of issues to do with voter bribery, electoral malpractices, and what body is in charge? Who is in charge in enforcing, in ensuring that political parties, for example, are financed, they share the money equally, enforcing those aspects, including the sanctions in case you found to be flouting electoral guidelines or laws?
There's a hand up by Peter Wandela. There's a hand up by Peter Wandela just to notify you.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, thank you again. And the discussions, experience sharing was really very interesting. Coming to your question, who is in charge on regulating the political parties in Rwanda? We have an entity known as the Rwanda Governance Board, which is the national authority in charge of regulating political parties, civil society, and other non-state actors. But regarding the asset declaration of political parties wealthy, it's done through the Office of Ombudsman. The Office of Ombudsman of Rwanda is the dedicated institution to receive asset declaration from political parties and individuals who are required to make that declaration on an annual basis. Come to the other question, there have been some issues of bribery. As I said, the system does not really give room for such malpractices, at least on the common citizen like me. It's not really on the public domain to, you can't be asked a bribe by an official who is running, no, or getting a bribe by an official who is running for a position, because the seats are already, the list is already fixed. If you are first, number 1, number 2, number 3, and your political party wins, let's say 5 seats, you are sure that you'll be in this list. There's no one who will come, even if during the legislature someone leaves, die, or the following candidate is the one who is coming. So it's really clear and very well respected. So what we said, what we suspect is how the people are put on the list. And this is done under the political parties internally. And of course, if you are not in the leadership of the political party, it's where we are questioning. But as I have the floor, I want to ask Honorable, we are talking about bribery money, but there are other forms of corruption in politics to access to the position, especially for women, gender-based corruption. What is your position, Honorable, as an practitioner who is with us here in this webinar? Corruption based on sexual favors to access to a position. What's its extent at the regional level and from your experience? Thank you. I'm not the moderator, but I have this question in mind to seek clarification and understand to which extent.
We are able to share with us the experiences of the gender-based violence in relation to as the women politician, female politician. What happens? This extortion element.
Thank you very much. I don't think that is a lot in politics, because I stand and the electorate are the ones to vote for me. So it is not like in government departments, for example, where you have a boss who is supervising you. And so for you, maybe to undertake a trip or for you to be promoted, you have to have sex with them. But the gender-based violence maybe here we could talk about is, for example, being intimidated, even on the floor of parliament. You see, there is a high rate of turnover amongst the women leaders, because in most cases, the men fight against them. The men fight against strong women leaders. So now you have so many women, for example, now in parliament in Uganda, you have so many new members of parliament, the women, and yet the men are doing their second term, they are doing their third term, others are doing their fourth term. And these men intimidate the new women members, and it actually affects the performance of the women members of parliament. So they are intimidated. For them, they are trying now to grapple with the systems of parliament and gain the courage to stand on the floor and speak, but they are being hounded by the male members of parliament, and there may be one or two could submit, but it is basically voluntary. There is no coercion that you must. You must. So they are sexually harassed, yes, but not to that extent, not coerced.
Okay.
I hope I have answered that question.
I hope so.
At least I can speak for Uganda. There is a lot of freedom. It is up to you as a woman leader, whether you want to submit or whether you want to be a woman of leader of integrity.
Okay.
It's a choice. Yeah.
There was a hand from Wandera. Wandera, can you please proceed and make a contribution, question, or Wandera, please proceed.
Listen.
I think, okay. Yes, Wandera, please proceed.
Yes, please.
Make your submission or question or clarity.
No, I don't have a submission.
I thought your hand was up.
No.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay, all right.
There is another hand up by Ochama. Ochama has his hand up.
Ochama, can you proceed? On my end, I can't see the hands up. Unfortunately, I don't know why, but Ochama, can you proceed and make your submission? Make your question.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. Let me hope that all of you are getting me loud and clear.
We can hear you. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. First, I would like to apologize for joining you late. I'm talking from Juba. I'm Gandino Chamo, the Executive Director of South Sudanese Network for Democracy and Elections. I would like to say thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I've been following it keenly. Some of these things you are discussing are completely new to us in South Sudan, as all of you know. My understanding is that we discuss about elections and bribery and politics in some of the East African countries. And mine is the people in East Africa, I presume, are well informed on the election processes, and they understand what they are voting for as far as elections are concerned. Now that bribery is involved in order to buy votes, with people who are already aware of what they are supposed to vote for, why didn't they take the money and yet vote for the right candidate or for the right party? I would like to be, educated here, because I'm thinking if it is for our case here, we can get the money and yet vote for the party that you think is right, if you are well informed. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ochama. Any other question I can take? I think let me randomly throw this question. Kennedy, there is a question. I'm going to throw it to you, and I think also anybody else is willing to make a contribution.
There is Dithan, his hand is up, Felix. Dithan.
Okay, let me also take Dithan's question and we handle those at the same time. Dithan, can you proceed? Ask your question, please. Unfortunately, on my end, I can't see hands up.
If you can unmute, yeah, he has unmuted.
Yes.
Can you make your contribution, Dithan? I
wanted to talk about the money and the elections in Uganda, especially, and Africa. We've seen people, especially youth, failing this thing of elections, especially because they don't have money to maybe support themselves. We've seen youth giving up on elections, giving up in campaigns, because at first maybe they start expecting something big. They start expecting full support, maybe free of charge. But at the end of the day, you find you're competing in an election with someone who is maybe a millionaire, and maybe for you are saving 100 shillings. Not even your worth is not even a million, but you're competing with someone whose worth is over 100 million. And then you find at the end of the day, it's difficult for you to continue campaigning. We've seen that. We saw it in our recent elections, 2021. We saw Honorable Nancy Karembe giving up on campaigns in her presidential bid. And we've seen many giving up on elections just because they don't have what to fund their campaigns. And then people back in the villages, the electorates I think they have become too desperate. Now they look for someone who is going to buy them alcohol, who is going to buy them salt during campaigns. They just vote for salt and alcohol, and that's all. They forget the 5 years they've just sold because of alcohol of 1,000, salt of 2,000. They forget 5 years because maybe first of all they've lost trust in electoral bodies in the country. You find or the whole district of all the people who voted and who were voted, you find almost every post there are election appeals on every post. And then you ask yourself, how do these electoral bodies, how are they doing this thing? Why are people not trusting the electoral bodies? Because then that one brings in a result of people now voting just for money, because they know even when I vote Dithan, because he has not given me money, he won't be announced as a winner at the end of the day. They will announce someone, Mr. X, because he has money, because he bought elections, and maybe some extent because he bribed the officials. That one, maybe that was my submission for today and for now. Thank you for listening to me.
Felix, do you want to respond? Felix, you want us to respond? Felix, you're not heard.
Okay, sorry, sorry, I was having some technical glitches here. Ethan, we've picked your comments. Let me first allow the question that came from a gentleman from Southern Sudan to be answered by Kennedy. I'm also seeing a hand up. Israel, your hand up?
Yes, I want to answer. Can I start?
Okay, please proceed and answer.
Can I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Let me start with, I think the comment by Ditam is on what I said, monetized politics. I mean, disappoint young politicians, the youth, women and people with disabilities, because they may not have that money to fight against the incumbent and those people with monetary powers. So I agree with you, big money is a problem. But desperate people, it's a reason with the participation. Hungry people or people who starve may not be interested to participate in political or public processes. And so cheaply you can get them if you promise you are going to give them something. We have an experience at one of the village in Tanzania a few years ago, maybe now it has changed. People are not coming to village meetings, not an election, just a village meeting. They don't come unless you promise them there will be some food in the meeting, and they will come. And they will only come when they're going to remove the chair of the village, because they like that those kind of meetings where they see a result. We were there and we removed the chair. So those kind of things. But I think we need to work also economic progress of electorate, not only talking about them to participate. But with Galdino or Chama, I think that's a problem. If you take money and you think you're going to vote, in some places I know in Africa where witchcraft is there, people can tell you, you take the money, if you don't vote, you're going to blot or you die. So you say, no problem, I will take and I will not vote. On the day of the voting or the polling day, you are alone in the box, in the ballot box. You look at yourself and you say, should I die? So why can't I just vote, cast my vote to this person? And so you will not do the truth of yourself. You must go back to the fear. But I think it's corruption. In Tanzania, the anti-corruption law states that whoever gives and whoever gets or receives the bribe or money in that nature of being induced, you are all doing corruption. So you cannot say you are eating or you are getting the money from this person and you think you are safe, that you will take the money and you vote to the other. In Tanzania, I think in the previous election, there was a famous say like delegates who were nominating their fellows, even in internal nominations. They said, I think you have very bad members of the nomination crew, because it was easy. You speak to them nicely. I don't know, maybe you have given them money or you just spoke. Very nice campaign. And they will promise you, we will vote you for you, we will vote for you. In the end, especially when you are not a member who can vote, you are just a contestant, but in that place, you do not belong to that place. You find in the box, it is 0. And then you say, what happened? Then people have suspected it is possible that if you use the money at a lower rate, there is somebody who came at the late hours and they gave even, an increased amount, and then could overtaken you. So your value become useless and people went for the best one. So I think even when you say, I will take the money and vote to the other, you will be named as unethical. You better don't do it. Just remain ethical. That order will help you.
There was Amos Maziku had his hand up. I don't know what happened, but Amos Maziku at one time had his hand up.
Amos, if you're still there, can you please proceed and make your comment or contribution or question? Amos, if you're there. And if there are comments coming through the chat box, and let me allow me to read some of them. There's a comment coming through that most regimes in East Africa thrive on corruption and an attempt to introduce legal instruments to curb corruption, whether elections or any other want to work. Okay, there are also other comments coming through which I can be able to read. Please, you can ask your question through the chat box and we'll be able to read them. Then also something around how candidates have to gain their money which they have invested in politics and also increase their salaries. There's that comment coming through YouTube. Also, you can ask your questions. We'll be able to answer them. 5 minutes to the top of the hour. I think I can only have one round of questions and that can take. Raise your hand up and we'll be able to pick you up and respond to your questions. But in the meantime, let me ask Jova Kamateka to can you give us your parting shots? I know you made your position clear that campaign finance legislation in Africa, we are not yet ready. But can you give your parting shots, qualifying what can we do then? What should be done? Honorable Jova, are you there? Did I lose her?
Yeah.
Okay, as I get Honorable Jova back, because we are now coming to the tail end of the discussion, let me come to Henry. Henry, as you give your parting shots,
I wanted to answer the question.
also help us and help us understand if there is a correlation between campaign financing and money laundering as you wrap up this session.
Thank you, Felix. We have seen in the recent elections that the money launderers have also chosen to use campaign finance as an avenue for money laundering. Quite often we have seen money from the proceeds of predicate financial crimes, such as corruption, such as illegal trafficking in human organs, such as trafficking in illegal animal products and other predicate crimes, finding its way into financing elections. And the reason they finance these elections, number one, is because the people that profit from these crimes would want pretty much to have a friendly government in place. But also, in case of the incumbent being favorable, they would also wish to maintain the incumbent so that they can continue with that trade. But also, campaign financing campaign period provides avenue for acquisition of very expensive real estates, and we've seen this happen. So at a campaign, during a campaign period, people spend quite a lot on acquiring these very luxurious apartment buildings to launder money. So there is a direct correlation between the money laundering and campaign finance, as we have been seeing, and Kennedy alluded to it. My parting shot, Felix. We remember, I will just use the words of Joe Biden, because Joe Biden said that democracy does not happen by accident. We have to fight for it. We must defend it. And I think East Africa, we need to rise up as civil society activists to make sure that we do whatever we can to fight for democracy, and where possible, defend it. A situation where a group of politicians are conspiring to render useless a very good campaign finance act, as it is in Kenya, a situation where legislators in Uganda are conniving not to legislate on this, a situation where all these things that undermine democracy are happening. We need to rise up and defend them. I thank you.
Honorable Jova Kamateka, your parting shots.
Thank you very much. For me, I think we need, I don't know how we are going to fight for this, but we need governments that have goodwill to fight corruption and have integrity within the community, beginning with our communities. A government that has the goodwill to fight corruption and, for example, regulate campaign financing will carry out civic education of its population to ensure that they are taught the benefits of exercising their free will to elect their leaders of choice, and to reject money, because it is possible for the population to reject the money. But what do you do when the money, for example, comes from the those who are in power? So we need free will. I don't know, Henry says we fight for our democracy. I don't know how we'll do this, but we need to urge our governments that enough is enough. We are tired of corruption. For me, ladies and gentlemen, for as long as we are handling corruption with the kid gloves, then we are not going anywhere. So we need a strong commitment to build corruption-free societies in which we will strongly regulate campaign financing and restore people's rights of to freely elect their leaders of choice. But also that begins with the governments that we have in power, those who are in power now, to educate members of the public. I wanted also to say that when we let the governments pay their representatives. They have those whom they have in for example, in parliament. Then you are robbed of these members of parliament who are elected now cannot concentrate on their core functions of representing their people, the voice of the people, of enacting laws that advance the human rights of the people, of allocating the necessary resources where they're supposed to go, and also carrying out oversight to ensure that the governments render the services to the people. Because if these people are put in there by the government, then they will not hold government accountable, and everybody suffers. So we need that to be done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Excuse me, please. Excuse me. Can I say this something? That finally, you see, it calls into question the quality of the leaders that we have, and the confidence and pride that people have in their institutions and in their country. So one asks, supposing we were given regulated campaign financing, are these the leaders would have in power? Are they up to the task? And if they are not, what does it do to the confidence of the people, the pride they have in their institutions, in their government, and in their country? It erodes that pride, and we would all want to be proud of our nation.
All right, thank you. Let me come to Apollinaire Mubiganyi, your parting shots. Mubiganyi, your parting shots. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think the topic we reflected on here was really more than relevant, especially on our continent, where, as you are aware from the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, Africa is among the continent more affected by corruption. And we can't pretend to eliminate corruption on our continent if we still have political corruption. Political corruption distorts all the principles of democratic governance. So I think this needs to be reflected continuously and see how really our representatives are there to serve the common good, not the private, not being there for their private gains. Thank you again for having invited us. Thank you for all. Thank you.
So much. Our next parting shots, I'm going to request Israel, as you make your parting shots, comment also on the question around the section 12.1, the regulations that prescribe ceilings for NGOs and FPOs that are participating in advocacy and public awareness activities in relation to elections. How the experience of CSO spoken with that close as you make your parting shots.
Thank you. First of all, I must say monetized politics in danger, and actually a threat to youth empowerment in public life. But also it also threatens people with disabilities to attend and participate in public life, including politics. And when there was some guidance in the law on civic education awareness creation in Tanzania, that CSOs are supposed to do 1, 2, 3, and they are given a ceiling, 1 billion, 1 million, 10 million. I think that could be the lowest if you do, depending on the size of the place. But I think this kind of, it is called the awareness creation or something. To me, they are not election observation activities. So the election observers have the guideline set by the the National Election Commission. So it is guiding there. But when they come to the registrar of political parties, it's about civic education. And if you want to reach out to political parties, you are restricted in that nature. So I think it is also some kind of a confusion. The election management body, which is supposed to reinforce or enforce the election expenses law, monitor and supervise elections, is not given the mandate also to look at election expenses. So that is a problem. But it's a more problem that even the one that has been given the registrar of political parties to monitor or look at how NGOs behave, these people are actually they are not giving the simple or clear way. There are some restrictive regulations forcing NGOs to write letters, to enclose a lot of things, and they have to be given permissions to either observe elections or do civic voter education. So those kind of restrictions need to be amended to make sure they do. Last year, very few organizations were accredited to become election observers, and leave alone the voter education providers. So my conclusion would say we need laws in Africa, in every country, to monitor and supervise financial expenditure during elections, but we need to make sure we promote the culture of democracy from the children and young people, so that as we do adult education to educate elders and the old guys, we must make sure we invest in the young generation so that we change the culture. Let them hate corruption. Let them hate any unethical practices during politics and elections. But also we have to make sure we invest a lot in civic education as a continuous exercise and voter education, not waiting for the electoral year. And that will help us to go back to the truth and help the continent to have democracy and a discipline in financial management during elections. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me come to our friend here in Kenya, Kennedy. Your parting shots and especially paint a picture of the role or the contribution of corporate companies in the politics of Kenya.
Thank you very much. Mine is a word of caution, and this is something that Honorable Jova Mateka, Henry, and even Israel has alluded to. As we engage in campaign finance regulation, we need to be very careful and make sure that we take into consideration the context in which the law is going to apply. In my view, given the level of democratic maturity in some of our countries and the region generally, availing some of the campaign finance laws to government is like handing a teenager, and even a toddler for that matter, a machine gun for a toy. We know that some of the provision, for instance, state funding, and it's been mentioned about Tanzania, and it also happens in Kenya, it reinforces the already existing inequalities among the parties, especially between the opposition and the government. Limits and bans on particular forms of funding just disadvantages also the opposition at the expense of the government. Disclosure will disadvantage the opposition because these laws could be applied in a discriminative manner. So as we fight for regulation, we must bear in mind the context and the kind of government they are dealing with. Otherwise, the question we should ask is, can campaign finance regulation advance democracy? There are instances where it could actually undermine democracy if we do not apply it properly. Otherwise, it was good to meet everybody, and I really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you.
I have 5 minutes to close this, and I'm giving you 1 minute. there's a question that has come through the chat area where they're asking the mandate of CSOs in supporting political campaigns. Where does it begin? Where does it end? And someone is referring to whether CSOs can be dragged into partisan politics. Henry, can you answer that question as I close?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I have seen that question. I think the mandate of civil society to participate in observing or monitoring elections is anchored and well stipulated within the constitutional mandates of a citizen with regard to participating in political activities. In terms of financing and participating and supporting the opposition, of course, civil society organizations should not be partisan, but of course they are political because civil society work by its nature is political. And therefore, sometimes we have been misinterpreted as civil society organizations to be supporting and working for the opposition, which is, I think, is a gross misunderstanding. And something I think we need to steer clear of, but also something that we should not accept to be used in order to cajole us into what we are not, because we should be able to stand up and speak out on things as they are without fear of being misunderstood or misconstrued to be supporting the opposition. That's what I can say, Felix. Thank you.
Oh, no, say something. Can I say something regarding that?
I want to close that. So you have a minute, Honorable.
Felix, it goes down to the basic tenets of democracy, that we are going to respect each other, we are going to respect the law and respect the various players. And so even if I'm an individual civil society organization, I'm also going to play by the rules, by the law. I'm not going to allow to be used, but also the government in power must respect, because these civil society organizations have made reports sometimes and the government has ignored them. So there must be respect for the rule of law and respect for one another. Thank you. Thank you so much for the engagement.
Thank you so much, Honorable.
Thank you.
We are coming to the tail end of this discussion. We were discussing campaign finance laws. Is East Africa ready to curb monetized politics? I think it is relevant. Kenya is going to the polls. Last year it was Uganda. A year before it was Tanzania and also Burundi at the peak of COVID. I think our colleagues in Rwanda have about 2 years to head into their election. So this discussion is timely and important. We need to keep it going. Thank you for all our viewers who have been part of this webinar. With me, I had Honorable Jova Kamateka, who is a former one member of parliament for Mutoma district. I also had with me Paulinieri Mupiganyi, who is the executive director of Transparency International Rwanda chapter. I also had with me the founder and executive director of the Youth Partnership Country Wide YPC Israel from Tanzania. I was also joined by Kennedy Masime, who is also an executive director at Center for Governance and Development, CGD, which is an NGO. It was good to have you with us. And I also had with me Henry Muguzi, who is the electoral democracy expert and anti-corruption activist, and also a researcher working at ACFIM as the executive director. And I myself was Felix Kafuma moderating it. Till next month, thank you. Bye-bye. It's been a pleasure to have this discussion with you. And let's keep it going on our social media accounts, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube.
Thank you.